I'm Brett McRae. My wife Chantel and I, we operate McRae Land and Livestock, 15 minutes southwest of Brandon, Manitoba. This is going to just kind of focus on the corn grazing side of our operation. I'm going to walk you through start to finish my thought process, how I select the fields, the varieties, everything about this time of year when you're planning to put it into the ground, right up to this time of the year next year when you're finishing it up. So, Max, do you recognize any cows up there? This was the big year. So I'm here talking about corn grazing. This past winter, I didn't do any, basically, because it was too wet to seed it, so we didn't get the corn planted, which was disheartening, but here we are. The year before, this was the big group. We had 510 head in that field at one time. So we've grazed anything from 50 head up to just over 500. We've been doing this for, I can't even remember how long now. I've been custom corn grazing for about 4 or 5 years. So we've got some experience. We're not experts at it, but we've learned some good things to do. We've made enough mistakes to learn what not to do. So we'll get into it. So we'll start with field selection. When I'm looking at a field of where I'm going to go corn grazing, the first thing I'm looking at is the rotation. We are a mixed farm. We're not just cattle. We're cattle and grain. So for me, corn grazing is a cash crop that I am marketing, whether it's through my own cows or somebody else's. So I'm looking first at, does it fit in my rotation? And then the big thing with corn grazing is when your cows are your harvesters and you have to look after them. So obviously shelter is important. The nice thing with corn is it does provide its own shelter to a point. In this field, do I have a pointer on here or no? Or is it this pointer here? So in this field, you can see we're open. We don't have bush like you guys do up here. It is very open where we live. This field, they went back. If I caught in a real wreck, this would be my storm shelter, is my cousin's yard. So there was shelter there. Thankfully, we didn't really have to use it other than once or twice. So for the most part, the cows are out here in the corn. The big thing is when you're corn grazing, try to work from the south end of the field towards the north, east end of the field towards the west, so the corn is sheltering for prevailing winds. But the big thing is if you can plan for storm days and have a plan for when it just turns nasty, it just makes your life a lot better. You don't have to worry about the cows out in if you just, you know what, it's going to be a 3-day blizzard and it's going to be minus 40. Stick them in the trees somewhere and they're good. And then when you're not in a storm, they come out of the trees and you shut the gate so you can protect that habitat in that area and they can go back out on the cropland where they should be. Our farm, a lot of it, we kind of have it planned for fencing and cross fencing. I think just about all of our stuff, at least at home, is all perimeter fenced pretty much all the time. And it's all electric fence. So for us to cross fence something, it takes not long at all. We have our system set up so that it's easy to do that. If you're on, new grain farm land, that's going to take a little bit more work. And available water is the other thing. Another thing you got, in this area of the world, there's a lot of potholes and sloughs and dugouts and access to water. We got to be planted a little bit more, and we got to get the hoe out and dig some dugouts. Which funding should pay for dugouts, by the way. I don't know who needs to hear that, but it didn't for one. Anyways, so this is the Windwagon 6000. It was the star of Twitter at one point in time. It's just a 60-foot Herman harrow that we took the harrows off and put windbreak boards on. That was when it was new. It has flipped over. I have got a plan to mitigate it flipping over, but it will flip over. But yeah, so that is some pretty quick shelter. You add a couple 30-footers on there. You can get a lot of cows behind that if it turns nasty. This is an outlay of, I gave this to the guy that was planting because we're doing a variety trial in this field, but this is basically an outlay of this field. So this north is up here. So we started, when we did that field, we actually started on this strip and then went backwards. If I were to do it again, I would start here on the east side, work my way north. My water is down about here. So I would work my way north, then do this strip, then do this strip, then do this strip, and work my way down it. We'll get into how big those strips are in a second. So on the crop rotation side of things, if you can follow a legume, that would probably be ideal. Dark straw from soybeans, peas, etc. would be better to help corn get warm, that ground get warmed up and get the corn off to a good start. And if there's residual nitrogen there, corn loves nitrogen, that works out good. Corn on corn does work. In our rotation, like for our cropping rotation, our basic rotation would be corn, canola, a spring cereal, winter cereal, then a legume, then back around to corn. So if in a perfect world, that would be the rotation I would follow, is a double corn there for a few different agronomic advantages. And then into canola after corn seems to be a pretty good standard around here. It seems to work quite well. And then into cereals, back to legumes, and back to corn. So that's that's the rotation that works for us. You got to find something that works on your farm. I do know that planting corn on corn with the planter that we get to do it works amazingly well. Following cereals, if you're going in behind, I've planted into winter wheat stubble. If you're going into cereals, I think there is going to be some tillage required. It's just too light a residue. You need the heat. As far north as we are, you need some heat to get that corn up and going efficiently. You can do it without tillage. I think your yield's going to suffer. And you can do no-till, no-till corn. Everybody, the corn guys of the world are going to tell you, oh no, in Manitoba, you can't do no-till corn. It's a lie. You can. You have to be set up for it. There's a few asterisks to that statement. But it is possible if that's what's for your farm. If tillage is fine to you and that's what your corn planter is set up for, don't worry about it. It's, one wrong thing doesn't wreck your whole farming system.
When you follow corn on corn, is there enough openness to have seed into that and have the ground warm?
Oh yeah, and I'll have pictures of that coming up. It's a good question.
Is that grazing corn both years, or some of that's chopped or combine or anything?
For us, that would. So on our farm, the only corn I've ever grown has always been grazing corn. My dad silages corn. It would work grain corn silage, or I would like to eventually be a grain corn then grazing corn in a perfect, which would be grain corn. We'd graze the stover, and that'd be the first grazing we did, and then we would go into grain corn or grazing corn later in the wintertime when we get snow to worry about and stuff like that. As we expand, there comes a point in time, if you have 5,000 acres, to have a sixth of that in grazing corn, you're going to need 5,000 cows. It comes a point where that's just not feasible. And for us, that's probably where our rotation will go back to, it might be corn, it might be this, but then we might slip in a cereal if we get a large enough acreage. There is a ceiling on how much corn you can grow and graze. If you're silaging, if you're grain corn, different story. When it comes to variety, if anybody has questions, stop me. Don't be afraid to put up your hand and let me know, and we can talk about as we're going. Variety selection. So this is one of the big things that I do in our corn grazing that really makes things work, and for a lot of reasons. So minimum 2 varieties. The planter I use is a central commodity hopper planter. You can only do 2 varieties without having to blend seed. If you have an 8-row planter and you want to grow 8 varieties, I think that's awesome. That's maybe a little bit much, but to put in 3 or 4, do it. 2 that I use, what I'm growing this year, will be North Star 913S and 932. So this is a 75-day or 2150 corn heat unit corn. This would be probably if you're growing grazing corn, this is what your agronomist is going to tell you to grow. This is an 89-day corn or a 2400 heat unit corn. This is what your agronomist is going to look at you like you have 3 eyes when you ask him for it. Because they're going to be they don't grow this in Morden. What are you doing with it? The reason you want this corn is because it's probably not going to get to black layer. It's for sure not going to get to black layer. It's not going to be fully hardened, mature corn. This is what keeps your acidosis out of your herd when you're grazing it, because then it's not going to get too mature on you. So you take your acidosis risk away. This corn, the 75-day corn, that's what you have in case you get an early frost. It's what would usually get to where you want for silage. It's probably not going to go to black layer, But if you have a really long, really warm year, it might. So you're gonna kind of get your energy from this, and this is your insurance package. You've got, if you have an early year, this stuff is going to be the shining star. If you have a late year, this is going to save your butt from having a bunch of cows go down. And if you have 2 or 3 other varieties in there, that's fine too. And that's where it comes to energy versus acidosis. Usually from your agronomist, when you plan out this field, they're going to tell you to do a lot of things that is going to get your energy off the chart, because they're thinking grain corn and silage corn. With grazing corn, you don't need to hit it as hard with the groceries like fertilizer and N and that. You don't have to get it in quite as early necessarily, and you don't have to have as low a heat unit variety, because you're not, like, even if you had just 932, unless you had a really, really super early frost, you're going to have cobs there. You're going to have energy in the cobs, and you're probably going to have more energy than you need. Your energy is not your limiting factor. Usually it's going to be fiber and protein. We're going to get into that in a bit. So yeah, if in doubt, go with more corn heat units. So this would be your longer heat unit corn. This would be your shorter heat unit corn. And then if it does make pretty cool, like once it comes into tassel, everybody in the world sees it. So it does make the field look pretty neat. If you have individual hoppers, you plan it out and you make like 2 and 3 and 1, and you can make your cornfield look really neat, make all the neighbors go like, what the hell is he doing?
With your high heat corn, the long term, and the grain corn, when you go that way, if you get a wet fall, they get into mold problems. Have you ever experienced mold?
There's been some, not enough to worry about. Most of the mold we see is in the stuff that we push down when we're pushing rows. I haven't had the problem so far. So it's probably a possibility. I haven't had the issue yet. So field prep. This slide is especially for those of you who are not familiar with growing corn. Like, we're just kind of doing this from beginners up to experts. Keep your go into a clean field. If you're in doubt, make sure it's sprayed, make sure it's clean, make sure you have that. Corn is a wimp until it gets this tall, and then nothing can stop it. At the start, you have to really, really baby corn along. A uniform seed bed is really important. When it comes to corn, you want all of your emergence to be like within hours, not days, hours. You want them to be as even as you can to make that corn, to kind of get your best corn crop you can. If you're a no-till guy, such as myself, no-till corn is possible, but this is where the asterisk comes in. You have to have the planter that can do it. So you need sharp discs. You have to be able to cut through the residue. You have to have enough downforce to get that disc to the proper seed depth consistently. You have to have seed firmers that will, when that seed drops down, it pushes it to the bottom of the seed V. Ideally with fertility, like with the starter fertilizer blend going on top of that. And you have to have closing wheels that can close that seed V and have loose, crumbly soil over top of it. You have to get, like, that seed placement is crucial. And that's why most guys will say you can't no-till corn in Manitoba, because they don't have their planter set up, and you don't have good seed to soil contact and seed depth. So if your planter can do all of these things well, it will work, and it will work really good. If not, you're committed to tillage. That could be where you put some of your fertility on with. You know, I'm not saying one's good or bad. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. If you're interested in the no-tilling corn, Exapta.com, like Exapta planter attachments. I don't know. Google Exapta, you'll find them. Company out of the States. They're really good at like sharing no-till information. Paul Yassa is a extension engineer out of University of Nebraska. That's where I've learned anything I know about no-tilling, is from those 2 sources, are chief among them. So here's some pictures. This is the planter that we use. The guy that owns this planter used to sell for precision planting, so it has every bell and whistle and option you can put on a corn planter. You don't need all of them, but some are very crucial. So he has hydraulic downforce that pushes this obviously has sharp discs. That's kind of a no-brainer. Even if you're not no-tilling, your planter should have reasonably sharp discs. He has hydraulic downforce that can push through the thatch layer and firm soil. He has, and it's hard, I don't have a good picture of it, but he has the little spiky closing wheels that crumble that soil on top of the seed bee. And the big thing is he has a Keaton seed firmer, which, so when that corn seed drops down, it's a little plastic arm that follows it and pushes it to the bottom of the seed row with a little plastic tube on there that puts a starter fertilizer and dribbles it right on top of the seed. So it has a phosphorus and a starter package that it wants to go right on top of the seed. And the other nice thing, which is, I don't know if it's a need to have, but for no-till it would be a need to have. A nice to have thing as well is he has, the fertilizer is 2 inches away from, so every corn seed in a row, 2 inches beside it is a band of nitrogen. So when he leaves the field, we're done. Like, if the seed is planted, the fertilizer is pretty much all there, and we just have to go in there and manage weed control and like, we don't have to, fertilizing and planting is done one step. So you can see behind here, he has a liquid caddy that comes behind him. One tank is for the starter, and then he has a big tank in the back for the nitrogen. Go ahead, Nelson.
How does he get his nitrogen in 2 inches beside the seed?
This disc right here. This is the nitrogen disc right there. And then it's in the shade. This is just from the tractor when I was riding with him. I don't have great pictures of it. So the disc, he has a row of discs up in front. You can see that wheel there is a fertilizer disc, and then these here are the actual row units. Yeah, very similar to a mid-row bander, except instead of mid-row, it's 2 inches off the seed row. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of things happening on this planter, but when he leaves, the other nice thing he has, a really nice thing, is he has the individual seed rows. So if he's going around a curve, each seed row stops individually. Very expensive option. You don't need to have it, but it's nice because it saves you seed. So when he leaves, I can give him like a curvy, not a straight line in the field, 80 acres, and I will give him enough seed for exactly 80 acres. And when he leaves, he gives me a bill for the 80 acres of planting and like to the liter how much fertilizer we used. So not everybody has that. I have that luxury or option to me, and I would highly recommend it. So having a planter that's up to the task is kind of the take-home message here. Whatever your planter is limited to, that's what you set your field around. This is obviously not a planter. This is a drill. This is after corn grazing. So who was asking about residue? This is what our corn, like, this is what we're planting into the next year. And this is what I talk about in a uniform seed bed. The only way I could kind of make this seed bed more uniform is if I came and land rolled this, just because some of the row units, like this is an 1890 disc drill, similar to your 1590. Some of these row units, when they hit, like the one that's on this row of corn stalks, would kind of bounce as it went. But with enough down pressure, like it leaves a nice uniform seed bed after. And this, if you're like, when we corn planted into this, the guy driving the planter, he's like, wow, I wasn't sure how this would work, and this is the best seed bed I've had all spring. So corn on corn, especially after grazing corn, absolutely works. Like you can see, there's manure out here, but like this, they don't leave a lot other than stalks, and already this stuff is starting to break down because this field's so biologically active. So when you're planting, the rule I've kind of abide by now, and my agronomist kind of gave me the don't plant yet, and we actually turned the planter away one year, and he come back. He wasn't very happy, but he come back 2 weeks later because he said, nope, it's too cold. The soil is not ready to plant. You need to wait. And in the end, I was very thankful I did. So you want to be plus 8 degrees Celsius at planting depth. So at 2 inches, you want to be 8 degrees or above for 3 mornings in a row. Once you cross that off the list, call the planter guy. Yep, the field's ready. You want to be 2 inches deeper. I have the argument with my planter driver. Like, he's planted a lot of corn, but I always want to go deeper. There's the seed right there. You can see the little blue seed. He calls that 2 inches to the top of the thatch. I call that 1.5 inches to 1.25 inches to the top of the soil. This grows. I think deeper is arguably better. I'd like to try it. This year we'll probably try a strip of going deeper. So you want that seed deep. The deeper you go, the more uniform that seed bed and the moisture and the temperature is going to be for those corn seeds. Fertility, if you can put it down with the planter, is ideal. You want the starter on the seed is ideal. That not all planters are up to that task, but if you can do that, that's kind of the best. If you're going to have an intercrop, ideally you want to be seeded north-south so that the light can get in between that canopy to your intercrop. If you're going just with regular straight corn, east and west is probably better. I'm going to be interseeding and sowing it east and west this year because I have an 80-acre field we're not going the short rounds just for the intercrop. If you're intercropping, the rule I've heard that I'm going to abide by this year is you want to wait till after May long. You want to give that corn, you want to get it up and out of the ground so it can compete with that intercrop a little bit. And you want to lower your population. This year we're going to go with, historically we've went with 30,000 seed population. This year we're going to be going with 24,000 in our intercrop corn. We're going to have 2 fields this year. One will be intercropped. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And it's going to be 24,000 population of corn. The other one's going to be straight corn, and it's going to be 30,000 population. So the interseeder, if we're famous for anything, it's this unit. I built this. You watch enough YouTube videos and go down the rabbit trail of soil health stuff, and you get into some weird stuff in the States, and you think, okay, if we want to add diversity, I guess how this started was our agronomist said your fields are low in phos. Well, how do we add phos? Well, you either pour the 1152 to it, which I didn't have the budget for that. Okay, that's out. Or you add pig manure. Well, I called the pig barn. They're 7 miles away, and they're like, no, that's too far. Go away. Okay, that's out. Well, what about beef cows? Well, it's not as good as the other 2, but it'll work. Okay, well, I got that option, so let's do it. We can add diversity to this. If we can sow something in between the rows, now with the soil health principle of diversity, that's easy to add because we can add a bunch of stuff in here along with our corn, graze it, have more soil cover, have more biology, have livestock integrated. This is starting to check a lot of boxes. So that's where we went into this. So then I got this idea, okay, let's take this is an old row crop cultivator with a old Valmar off a 40-foot cultivator. Actually, that's 2 Valmars put together because I'm cheap, so I went on eBrandon and found 2 junky ones that I kind of pieced the parts together and made this thing actually functional again. Took the cultivator shanks off the cultivator because I'm a hardcore no-tiller, so I was like, nope, can't do cultivation, which I don't know if that was the right answer or not, but that's what we did. I think the residue, going through that kind of residue, there would have been too much root mass to make it viable. So we took some fertilizer discs off another old corn planter and pieced that together, and the interseeder was born. So this will go between the rows. Those are 18.4 tires. And between 30-inch corn rows, no problem. You can do it. Your GPS won't keep you there, but you can drive it, and it's actually kind of a fun job. Even my cousin was like, I thought this was going to be the dumbest thing ever. It's kind of a fun job when you're driving through standing corn with duals on and not, as long as you're paying attention, not smashing down a single corn plant. So after, this is what it looked like. This would have been July-ish. So you can see there's some buckwheat there. We've had buckwheat, sunflowers, sweet clover, Italian ryegrass, rye, oats. We've kind of tried everything. Some have worked better than others. We're going to get into this in more later. This is going into 30-inch corn, and it works okay there. We did try some 60-inch corn trials. They didn't work out quite as well as I had hoped. So with the interseeding, the big thing I found is it's risky. It's hard to get this established, and I haven't been able. This year we're not going to. The interseeder is going to be parked. We're not going to be using it because it's too time sensitive to get this in late enough that it's not going to hamper the corn, but early enough that it's actually going to thrive. It gets pretty choked out pretty quickly, so it's hard to get enough biomass between the rows to really count. And the other thing is it needs specialized equipment. For 2 or 3 years, every year we would take the duals on this tractor and we would slide them from about 90-inch centers, so you can have a loader tractor in the winter and not tip your tractor, and you can go cutting hay, and the hay swaths will go between your rows, to before haying season, we would slide these in, which is a miserable job, and everybody hated me. So I was not very popular, but we would slide the wheels in, slide these ones in, okay, then do our interseeding, then okay, it's haying time, so then get the big wrenches that, like, these things are torqued to 450 foot-pounds, and crack those loose and slide them out, and everybody'd swear at Brett, and that was kind of just what we did for 3 years. We're not doing that anymore, thankfully. The nice thing about interseeding, there is more cover crop options. Like, we had like a 9-way blend in here, so you can seed pretty much anything as long as you're going in behind glyphosate corn. There's no residual on glyphosate. That is a nice thing about it. And you have some chemical options, not just glyphosate, like Bactrim M would work. There are some other options chemistry-wise you can use. Compared to where we're going this year, this is actually interseeded, but it's a nice picture, so I threw it there. This year we're going to do a polycropping system. I was on the Covers & Co. webinar. They talked about using forage soybeans that they've got out of the States. I have those booked. We're also going to put hairy vetch in. The forage soybeans are Roundup Ready beans, and the hairy vetch is somewhat glyphosate tolerant. I had tried this about 4 years ago, and it failed on me. Not from the beans, but the vetch, I smoked it out. But I didn't know to lower my glyphosate rate. So according to the Covers & Co. guys, you want to go to 0.75 of a rel. So if you're using 540 glyphosate, that's half a liter per acre, or 0.5 a rel or 0.33 if you're going to go twice. So you can spray it once, spray it twice, but you have to lower your rate far below what you would usually spray corn at. You're limited to straight glyphosate here. Obviously, like your Bactrim M's, your other broadleaf sprays are going to smoke the forages in here. But from the pictures I've seen and the people that have done this, they've kind of proven this system to work. If you're looking for more information on this, like, this is what I'm going to be doing. Covers & Co. have a webinar online. Look it up. I can send you a link if you can't find it. So that's what we're going to be doing this year. So when it comes to intercropping, so this was all taken, I'm pretty sure, from the same field or the same year. So we had, like, in the summertime, we had, like, there's a fair amount of biomass. Like, you can see, like, the cobs would be up here. Like, this is about knee height right there. So, like, there's a pretty good amount of biomass there. Come wintertime, you get a first wet, heavy snow. It all sticks to the ground. And, like, there's the glove. We digged it up. And the cows ate it a bit. But by the time the second snow came, they were just on corn. So, yes, there was soil health benefits from this, absolutely. We had diversity, we had all the soil health things, but as far as adding forage to this and adding the things I want to add to the ration, it didn't really work the way I was hoping. So that's the growing season. So kind of from now till July, that's the basics of what I've learned. Is there any, before we go into the fall time, is there any questions so far?
Would you do that again? Like, do you find that there's a benefit doing it in between if you're not getting the kick from the cattle feed with the intercropping like that? I know there's soil health benefits, but do you think it's worth doing?
That depends. Like, for this year, we're not, because I'm trying to get some usable forage as long as with the other benefits, and it's busy. Like, this, you're doing this in, usually we would, do 2 passes of glyphosate on the corn. So you'd plant it, 2 weeks later you'd spray it, 2 weeks later you'd spray it again, and you'd be out there interseeding either right before or as soon as you were done spraying it, you'd go out and seed it. Or ideally you'd seed, like, interseed it and then spray it the next day. And, like, so you're doing this all kind of the end of June, start of July. So it's a race to the finish line. And then your wife's saying, like, come on, let's go to the lake. And you're like, no, I'm out here interseeding. You're not very popular then. So there's a lot more fun jobs to do, and it's very time sensitive. Go ahead.
What's your starter fertilizer you're putting down, and, like, what's your side one, like, what's your analysis, I guess, for total fertilizers?
So on the the starter fertilizer or the side band is just straight 2800, straight nitrogen, 30 gallons an acre, 90 pounds an acre of actual N. And the starter blend is an Alpine liquid starter blend. And this is, so the planter's owned by Daryl Carlisle, like Carlisle Liquid Starters. And then he has a guy that, Jim Ritchie is the guy that operates it for him, he's a fantastic operator. But I just said to Jim, Daryl's grown way more corn than I ever have, and he grows good crops. Whatever he uses, just put that in the blend. We're going to do I'm hoping if he'll let me run something else through the planter, we're going to try using some Johnson Sioux compost extract in the one field this year to see how that compares to the Alpine blend. There's a lot of logistical issues we got to make sure actually happen to make that work. But I think that'll be a fun trial. But as far as, we just use his Alpine blend. It's got all the Alpine stuff. I'm new to that system. But then with the 90 pounds of N, I don't think I've top dressed corn yet. I might this year. But so far I've not. That's been enough to grow me a pretty good crop of corn.
When you're doing your blended between rows, you're gonna try with the beans and you do 60-inch rows or just 30-inch?
Oh, good question. So where's that? Okay, here we'll just jump ahead to this so this is a 60-inch row. So this is the year my cover crop didn't work, but the year before I had annual ryegrass for seed production. So this is my volunteer cover crop, or my accidental cover crop, of annual ryegrass that's now probably a weed in that field, but that's beside the point. So this is 60-inch corn. There's a lot of space there. And there's a lot of room for weed escapes there. And the big thing, and Jim Ritchie had mentioned that to me when I said we're going to try some 60-inch corn, is the problem with 60-inch corn is they're too tight within the row. Like on 30 inches, for 30,000 population, your corn seeds are about 6 to 9 inches apart. When it comes to 60-inch corn, to keep the same population, which is what I was told to do, now you're like 3 inches apart. And then as it grew, that was the trials that I had on that first page with the blue and white field laid out there. We did three strips of 60-inch corn and 3 strips of 30-inch corn. And the 60-inch corn, you would have a really good corn plant and 2 marginal ones, and then a little crappy guy, and then a good one, and then a marginal one, and then a crappy guy. And it wasn't consistent. Versus the 30-inch, every corn plant was the same. And I figured, well, I'm paying the same for this corn seed as this corn seed as this corn seed. I want them all to be good. And that's why we're sticking this year. We're going to go to 30-inch corn, so 30-inch row spacing, but a lower population to stretch that space a little farther yet to try and get some light penetration into the canopy. On our straight corn, we're sticking with 30-inch corn, 30,000 population, pretty gold standard drive on. Does that answer the question? So there's a lot, if I could get the interseeder thing to work, I think there's potential in this. I think there's more potential for us in our climate to have 30,000 or 30-inch spacing corn at a lower seed population. I think from a competitiveness and an agronomic standpoint, it's got more advantages. This is cool because you can drive the quad all the way down with corn over your head, you can drive the quad from one end of the field to the other. So that was neat. Any other agronomy type questions? Feel free to interrupt later if you want. Now, this is a question I get asked a lot, is how do you figure out, okay, I've grown my grazing corn, I'm ready to turn the cows in, how do I know how much I got? And this is like carpentry with a chainsaw estimating. This is very rough, but it will get you close. If you go onto Google and look up corn yield estimator, MASC, Pioneer Seeds, just Google corn yield estimator, you'll find one. And they'll tell you to measure out 17 feet, 4 inches or 5 inches of a row, assuming you're 30-inch spacing on your planter. If you have a different planter spacing, they'll tell you how long of row you need to find 1/1000th of an acre. And then you take off, I don't know how many cobs, it'll tell you how many cobs to pick off. And then you count how long they are from one side to the other, and then how many kernels around they are. And then you enter all that information into their online calculator, and it'll spit out, this is kind of your poor, medium, good yield. And it'll give you kind of an estimate of what your yield's going to be. It's a little bit, I can't think of the word. There's a lot of variation in there, but again, chainsaw carpentry. This will get you close. From there, to calculate your grazing corn, you're going to take your grain yield that it gave you, multiply by 54 pounds a bushel in corn, and I multiply by 2 because a corn plant, I've been told, I haven't weighed this myself, but a mature corn plant, 50% of the weight is in the cob and 50% of the weight is in the forage and the stalk and everything else. So I take my grain yield, multiply that by 2, I assume a 90% utilization rate, and that tells you what my forage yield is. So if you have 125 bushel corn, pretty good corn crop, times 54, times 2, times 90%, there is just over 12,000 pounds of grazable forage per acre there. Does that make sense to the non-mathletes of the room? Okay? If you're going to go, if you put your 1-year-old there, it makes your corn crops look really big. So now, the next part of this equation, if you take your cow weight times, I'm assuming a 3% body like intake, that's the word I'm looking for, times your number of cows you have in your herd, that gives you your demand. So 1,350 pound cows times 3%, they're going to eat 40 pounds of forage per cow per day. So if you have that 12,150 pounds, they're going to eat 40 pounds a day. That's 300 cow day an acre corn. And as I've estimated this usually comes out pretty close. There's going to be variation along your field. There's other factors that play into this, but that'll get you, like, you do the math on this, you're going to be between probably like 260 to 320. Like you'll be close. So other ways of looking at this, if you have 80 acres of corn with 300, you figured out that you've got 300 cow days an acre, you got an 80 acre field, and you have 250 cows, you've got enough feed for 96 days. Or you've got 80 acres of corn and 300 cow days an acre, you want to graze for 120 days, you can bring in 200 cows. Everybody good? Okay. So this was us, so I got the tape measure out here, I measured my 17 feet, and then I took, I think it was like every 5th cob, counted them all, averaged them, and then did all the calculations here. I was supervised, so you know it was right. So in the fall setup, when I'm setting up my paddocks, I use a 300, those strips, the blue and white sheet again, those strips were 330 feet wide by 66 feet between posts. So I use my posts as an acre counter. So however wide your strip is, figure out what your post spacing needs to be to use that as a half an acre or an acre. Because there's how many square feet in an acre?
43,560.
I was going to bring chocolates, but I forgot because I was going to give an award for that one. Exactly. Sorry. So what we've done before is we put up our corridors first, because then you just follow the corn row, and whether you're GPS or not, you just kind of follow your corn row and make your corridors for like going this way. And then what we've done in the past is we'd step out or put in wherever our post needs to be. And then we'd put a flag on this one, and you'd put a flag on either side, and you'd drive. What we do to knock our corn rows down is just take our tractor bucket, tip it all the way back, and put it about knee height, and then drive. And it'll just knock those corn down so you can get line of sight. And then what we've done is just put a flag up on either side, and you just drive from one to the other. And it takes 2 guys, and you kind of drive to the flag, then turn around, drive to the next flag. And it works. What we did the last time is I just kept a GPS on our tractor into the fall, and then before we took the GPS out of the tractor, we just set up for, I knew where my 330-foot mark was. I had that marked out, I think anyways, I found it. And then I just set my GPS for 66 feet, and then just drove up and down. And then we went in with the tractor after, and then every intersection we put a post. And that worked out really, really well. When you're putting the wire on the post, put it as high as, higher than you normally would. Usually I go on a 2-wire fence, I go there and there for a single wire fence. You want to be kind of hip height. You want to be as high as you would for the top wire and 2-wire fence because the snow is going to build up. Screw-in insulators work really good for this because you're going to pull those posts out again later at some point in time probably. You can salvage your insulators if you have those screw-in, screw-out ones. The lesson I have to learn is gates are expensive, but they're very handy. Lifters work, but they really suck in the winter. Lifters in the winter are not enjoyable. If you can put a gate in there, put it in. Once you get a bunch of snow, lifters just are a pain. When it comes to supplementing, you're going to need fiber, protein, and calcium. Corn and alfalfa go together hand in glove. They are a really good match for each other. Alfalfa hay is probably the easiest and most convenient thing to supplement your corn with because you're getting extra fiber, you're getting protein, and with alfalfa you're getting some calcium. Other proteins could be cheaper. I've used DDGs or DDG pellets in the past. They were cheaper per pound of protein, which is how you figure that out, but they're harder to feed and it's harder to get the intake. If you're feeding a corn distillery grain pellet, it's not different enough from the corn that's in the field that the cows don't go to it. Versus if you give them alfalfa hay and they're like, "Ooh, what's this? This is good." So if you're looking, this is your formula: pounds of dry, dollars per pound, 8-cent hay, 90% dry matter, 20% crude protein. You're 44 cents per pound of protein, and that's how you compare DDGs to alfalfa to whatever on a per pound of protein basis, because that's mostly what you're going to have to supplement with. We have had to supplement, this field this year, we supplemented it with straw because our energy was off the charts, and we fed 7 bales of straw a day. A lot. It was a lot of straw, but we were also well over 400 grazing days an acre on most of that field. So it just kind of depends how much work you want to put into it. Yeah, we randomly feed tested this field. And then our nutritionist come up and he's like, "You want to put straw here?" I was like, "That's a lot of work." He's like, "You're going to get another 100 days an acre." I was like, "Okay, well, that's worth a little more work." And I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it. I saw probably of the 500 cows, 50 cows walk a half a mile from corn I just let them into, walk a half a mile back to eat straw. They will balance their diet. I couldn't believe it. Okay. So day one, you've got everything set up. You're ready to start into the field. Day one of corn grazing. Make sure the rumen is full. Write that down on your paper, underline it, and circle it, please. They have, feed them hay in the morning, feed them some more hay, some really good quality stuff in the afternoon, right after lunch, and then let them in 3-4 o'clock. Make sure they are full, they hardly can take another bite. And then let them into the field. And that's you can see me here letting them in. You can see sun's going down. It's starting to get later in the afternoon. That's when you want to let them in. They're right as full as they can be with hay. The rumen's full. They go and get their feed on corn. They're going to eat all the cobs off, go lay down, sleep. Next day they get up, they eat the rest of the corn plants, and then then they're good. If you do this, you will get rid of 80% of your problems grazing corn. Once they get in and they get accustomed to it, they're very, very forgiving. So enter with a full rumen, small paddocks, move often, make sure they clean it up. A good tip here is to have a hay feeder with either straw or poor quality hay. If they're starting to eat it, it's time to move them. If they're not interested in that yet, they need to work harder. Rule number 2 of corn grazing, make sure they clean it up. Please underline that as well. My dad is a sucker for big brown eye syndrome. Is when you go over to the field and they all come to the fence and they bawl that we're hungry. We've just cleaned up this corn. This is like, whoop, sorry, knocked over coffee. This is what it looks like. They've got, it looks like they've knocked it all down, and they're coming up to you and they're bawling and they're hungry, like they're starving, you can tell. And you let them in, and you go back the next day and you find 5 dead ones. And then you scratch your head and wonder why and say, oh, this stupid corn grazing, this didn't work. I know this was dumb. Not that I've seen that in real life, but, So yeah, if these cows, do not move them. You can see there's some stalks, there's some cobs left there, there's lots of leaves left there. These cows are not ready to move. These cows over here or like this area of the field there's basically just stalks left. There's hardly any leaves. If the cows just had this piece of the field, they'd be overeating. Thank you, Cameron. They'd be overeating the straw bale to fill up. So yeah, use small paddocks. The more you move them, the better. Make sure they clean it up. And again, use some poor quality hay or straw as a guide. So here's some pictures. This is what it should look like when you're done. This here, there's maybe a little, they could almost clean that up a little bit, but this is obviously just a little chunk of the field. Most of that field looked like this. Like you want to see pretty much snow and basically just stalks left. If you see a lot of leaves left, they've got more work to do. So if you're moving 1 to 3 days is ideal. I move usually every day, but up to 3 days at an allocation is okay. The more moves you do, the more work it's going to be. But the more moves you do, the less risk you will have. There's less of the roller coaster diet, and you'll get better utilization. They'll be able to clean it up like that previous picture. If you're supplementing with protein, one thing I will do is I'll move every second day. So give them corn one day, alfalfa hay the next, back and forth like that. That works really good. If you need to corral them, we learned this one the hard way. Feed them before 6 to 12 hours before you want to take them away from the cornfield. Or you're going to go to the cornfield and they're going to be like, it's breakfast time. And then you can't get them out of there to get them to corral, to vaccinate, or whatever you got to do. And you're going to swear at them for the whole morning. And then if you're doing the protein supplement thing, use the supplement as bait. So, okay, you moved them yesterday and maybe you moved them 6 hours ago, and now we're going to go with a supplement bale of alfalfa, and they'll hopefully follow you to the pen and make that a little easier. Okay, wrapping up here. Some tips and tricks. The best thing I learned from Steve Kenyon. On your water system, have a really hot wire, like as hot as you can get it. And then this wire under here is a ground wire that goes right to, there's a ground rod right there. That goes directly to ground. So this is 100% ground, and this is very hot. So every day they go in here, and when they get fighting for water, they get a good reminder that they need to be ladies and act politely. And they also remember that wires are things we don't touch. That way, when they're out in the cornfield, they remember, oh yeah, wires are things we don't touch, so we're not going to push through the wire. This saves a lot of frustration. I like to use polybraid wire. It used to be Powerflex. Now Gallagher has a really nice product. I like Gallagher reels myself. Use whatever you like. Not all posts are created equal for winter grazing. These PFI posts, you can get at Total Farm Supply with a little spade here. They've got a big enough piece here that you can use a hammer and hammer them in rather than have to carry a drill. That works good. If your soil health is at the right level, 2 years ago, I don't think I started carrying a hammer or a drill until about mid-February when I had to have snowshoes on. Because I couldn't, up until then, I could wiggle the post in and get it into the ground. Use good quality materials. It makes your life a lot better. Some rules of thumb, you want to plan to be done by the 15th, 20th of March. This year's not normal, but usually by right now, it's starting to get soft, you're starting to get mud. Corn grazing in mud is no fun. And if for feed testing, somebody's asked about feed testing, use a wood chipper. Somebody told me that. I'm going to buy one this year for our corn grazing plots. If you want, call me and come over and we'll probably just go to Canadian Tire and get just like a cheap wood chipper to chip up your corn so you can get it to a feed test. I've done it with an axe before. It takes a long time. So Couple more pictures to finish off here. Like this I can't remember what winter this was. Like they'll swim belly deep in snow and get to corn, and these cows did just fine. Our utilization maybe suffered a little bit, but like that was snow this deep. We were moving in snowshoes and skidoos all winter long. It was work, but those cows were just fine. This is an example of here's your longer season corn, longer season corn here, shorter season corn there. You can see this stuff's more mature than this. That kind of wraps it up. Little free, cheap plug while I'm up here, I guess. We're hiring. If you know of somebody that's interested in a career in regenerative agriculture, we have a pretty flexible position. Anything from a full-time to a couple of part-time positions available on our place, and we have a lot of room for advancement. If you want to come and start moving wires and have the dream of someday being a pasture manager, we could be the place for you. So if you know anybody that would fit any of that, please send them our way. And that concludes. This is Caddy, the Cadillac of cows. She was my favorite that one year. But that concludes our corn grazing.
When you're supplementing forage or hay out there, are you feeding every day or every second day?
I would do at least every 3 days, twice a week at minimum.
Okay, are you rolling it out then, or shredding it?
I'd roll it out. Yeah, probably what I'm planning on doing this year is planning to supplement with alfalfa hay, and we'll probably unroll it out. In a perfect world, I'm going to make a fancy like bale unroller, similar to what like a bale truck would have. But unrolling it so that I want everybody to take a bite of protein at the same time.
And you're only giving about 5 to 10 pounds then?
Yeah, it'll be based on how much protein they need or fiber. We'll balance the ration and then feed them exactly that. It'll be limit fed.
After grazing, the first year 2, is your fertility requirements changing at all when you're going in?
Year 2, they did not. Year 3, we saw, so that would be last year, we saw a dramatic decrease from our soil test recommendations, where we had, and not just on our corn, but where we had been using soil, like our soil health program the longest, we saw a dramatic difference between that and the newly rented land we had. That was 1 year. I haven't proven that give me 3 years to prove that, and then I'll have more confidence in that. But yeah, like the first year I thought, we only have to put on half the nitrogen. No, it takes some time to fill up to kind of prime the system. So.
How many times did you get shocked with that wire across the drinker?
Across the drinker, I don't think any. In the field, all the time. I like when I'm unrolling my wires, I always do it hot because I like to live dangerously. So.
What about your vet? Did it decrease the amount of protein that you needed to supplement, Brett? When you had it interseeded, or did you see much success?
No, because the interseeded stuff didn't get big enough that they could get a bite of. We didn't really see that's my dream, is to have enough vetch and soybeans there that we really don't have to supplement it.
So when are you going to sow the soybeans?
So from the Covers and Co recommendation is we're going to seed that field the day before the planter comes. I'm probably going to seed it on a bit of an angle, and then if I didn't have the planter like with all the fertilizer and stuff on, that's when I would put my fertilizer down too. Like I would put my fertility down there and then plant the next day. But what I'm going to do is just seed that stuff on an angle, and then the planter's going to go in, seed it straight east and west, and then put all the fertilizer down then. So, and that's going onto barley stalks. So I think my drill going through there is going to blacken it up enough. I'm hoping that it should be okay going after cereal. That's my plan. And then I'm hoping that it grows enough forage and that the vines around the corn enough that it'll hold it up out of the snow. Because even on the stuff that grew this high, it was good, but it was too lush and green that the first snow just knocked it all down. Like you almost need like a cereal or something with a hard stalk to keep it from the snow knocking it down.
So do you think if you could sow that vetch in the corn row, it would help, or would it be too competitive?
Yeah, I don't know. How do you do that is the first one.
Well, I've got some sort of idea, but.
I guess if you're going with a drill, I'm always thinking of a planter. Like with a planter, that's very hard. If you're seeding with a drill anyways, yeah, try it.
Yeah, I don't think you
Have you considered that swapping sort of the corn with the other stuff that you got growing in there to put it all together, so like the snow doesn't take it down, like your polycrop that's in between your corn rows?
No, but I'm also in my context. I need shelter because I don't have we can watch our dog run away for 3 days where I live, so I need shelter. So that's why I always keep the corn upstanding. But good thought process.
In southern Ontario, Quebec, they're doing a lot of this with strip tillage.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anybody in Manitoba that has a machine set up for that?
I think I've heard of one strip till machine I've heard of, but I would find somebody in Carmen or Portage, because if you're going to find one, that's where it'll be. Nelson?
Regenerate from Eli, they actually sell some of that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Equipment if you're
Alex Borsch, very good guy. He's one of the ones in the General Mills program as well, right? Anything else?
I'm sure Brett's open to questions. He's got his phone number up there.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to get a hold of me, come talk anytime. I'd be happy to help out with stuff.
Any last questions for Brett? I will thank you very much, Brett.
Okay. Sorry for making